Good evening. This is Perspectives. I'm Setareh On. In tonight's program, we take you to New York to talk about money. Even at this early stage of the U.S. presidential election, when Republicans are still trying to decide who will challenge President Obama, economic issues are dominating the debate. President Obama even focused much of this year's State of the Union address on America's economy. First, we go to the New York Stock Exchange, which has symbolized capitalism and free markets for nearly 200 years. Larry Leibowitz, the chief operating officer of the New York Stock Exchange, takes us on a tour of the trading floor to explain how Wall Street works. Next, we take you to meet Steve Forbes, head of the Forbes publishing empire, where they're proud to call their publications the capitalist tool. Mr. Forbes himself ran for president in 1996 and 2000, campaigning on a platform for free market capitalism. Despite the economic woes in the United States and elsewhere, he'll explain how capitalism will save us. That's the title of his most recent book. But first, let's listen to the election debate and those who want to occupy the economic discussion.
We created 16 million jobs.
While politicians debate how to lower America's unemployment rate, some who feel the distribution of wealth is out of proportion took to the streets last year.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
The Occupy Wall Street movement started in New York's financial district.
There is no doubt that there are a lot of people who are frustrated and angry. They are frustrated they can't get jobs. They look at people that they feel are responsible for that. If you look at almost every major economic crisis since the world, the bankers have been blamed for it. If you look at the Great Depression, if you look at, and no doubt there are always excesses, it's really a matter of working together to find a solution where we can grow together and having a plan for that and looking at the problems that we have constructively.
We are 99%!
The Occupy movement says it represents 99% of Americans, in contrast with the 1% who hold most of the country's wealth. The movement says these people benefit disproportionately from America's financial system. Steve Forbes says the Occupy movement can't be taken as seriously as the Tea Party movement, the political group formed in 2009 to support candidates who promote less government, free markets, and fiscal responsibility.
Since the occupiers had no political agenda other than they didn't like the way things were, they had no specific platform, no desire yet to participate as citizens in winning elections. Well, we have a primary system in this country where voters choose the candidates for each party. Tea Party movement participated in that. These folks so far have not.
Hey guys, how are you?
During the Republican presidential primaries, the candidates are showcasing their conservative ideals, praising individual initiative to work and contribute to society without intervention from the government.
This is time for us to recognize that the system of laws we have and the free enterprise system works. And we don't need government stepping in with regulations and higher taxes and telling us what we can and cannot do as a society to try and keep America strong. The best way to get America's economy going is not to think about how much we can push government into the American economy, but instead how much we can get government out of the American economy.
Democrats, however, think markets need some regulation to keep them open and fair for everyone. And the New York Stock Exchange is at the heart of these free markets. The floor of the exchange was once filled with traders and brokers shouting their buys and sells.
25 Dow at 67, 95.
It's now quietly managed by computers. We ran into floor trader Ken Polcari, who helped explain the change.
Remember, this was the only place to trade listed securities. All the volume came here. But as a result of the technology now, the venues have, there's been an explosion in venues, and so you have to have the ability to represent your customer in all different venues. So in that sense, it's become a little bit less personal. It's become much more automated, but the automation has certainly brought efficiencies to the marketplace in terms of accuracy in reporting, less problems in erroneous reports, that kind of stuff. So that's all been good.
There may be fewer people, but the New York Stock Exchange is still by far the world's largest stock exchange, and automation allows you to plug in from almost anywhere.
customers from around the world can sit at their desk, they can enter an order, highlight a broker in the US, and send the order, and it goes from wherever they're sitting to here within 2 seconds. It appears off your screen and onto my screen within a 2-second time frame. Actually, I think it's even faster than that, but 2 seconds sounds fast enough as it is.
I asked Larry Leibowitz to tell us about the role of the New York Stock Exchange.
People want to know what's happening in the markets 24 hours a day, and the news coverage, a lot of it is focused from here. So if you watch almost any station around the world, you see the New York Stock Exchange. So just as a symbol, it's an important symbol of sound financial markets. I think if you look a little deeper, stock markets are where companies go to raise capital. That's how they get money to expand. That's how they get money to hire people and to create jobs, to invest in new businesses. And so that's where economic growth actually comes from. So that's really an important feature of stock exchanges. The second side of that is it's where people invest for their futures. Right? When stock markets do well and people put investments into the stock market, that's how they save for retirement, that's how they build wealth. And so it's this virtuous cycle or circle where people are investing in companies through their stocks. That's how companies get money to invest in their business, which is how they hire people. And that's kind of how the whole economic cycle works. Yeah. So stock exchanges really are at the center of so much of what happens in creating new jobs and economic growth.
You know, there's a lot of talk these days about capitalism, what's going on with the global financial crisis. Do you think it's the fault of capitalism itself? And how does it measure to alternatives when you look at China or Brazil? Because the world is watching the economic situation in the United States and the European Union.
Sure. I mean, I think if you look around the world, most of the successful markets, whether they're capitalist or some form of capitalism, whether you call the Chinese system or the Brazil system capitalist or not, there's some element of free market, and that's actually what's accelerated their growth. The free market accelerates growth. On the other hand, it also creates challenges sometimes in terms of regulation and other issues that arise as a result of that competition. On the other hand, markets that are highly controlled and closed also run into their own problems if you look at other markets around the world.
Or maybe even the year after that.
From politicians to protesters, fairness remains at the heart of the economic controversy. According to Leibowitz, the New York Stock Exchange has made it a priority to have fair and open markets for investors.
We're here to run a highly transparent market, and we do stand for integrity. What we also stand for is a transparent dialogue. I mean, I think they're frustrated, and in a lot of ways they've been unable to really put forth a platform that people can then look at and say, well, this makes sense. And in a lot of times it feels like they don't really understand the system they're protesting against. On the other hand, if you look at the other side, you could say the same thing about them. What I think it does do is foster a good dialogue. It's important that we ask these questions about whether it's capitalism, democracy, all of those different things. That's what we should be questioning. On the other hand, if you look at some of the things that they want, participatory democracy where everyone gets a vote in everything often doesn't work. If you look at California...
So democracy doesn't work?
Participatory, where everyone gets a vote on everything. If you look at California as an example, one of the reasons that their finances are in such difficult straits is that it's very easy to get a popular referendum on their ballot. That means everyone gets to vote on it. Then it becomes law, and the lawmakers can't control that budget. Now you've got this swelling budget that can't be controlled. Everybody obviously always wants more.
Unemployment in the United States is at around 8.5%. Over the last decades, American factory workers have seen many of their jobs transferred to Asia, Latin America, and Africa.
I met with business leaders who are doing their part by insourcing, by bringing jobs back to the United States. And I told them that if you are willing to keep asking yourselves what you can do to bring jobs back, then I'll make sure that you've got a government that helps you succeed.
The technology, automotive, clothing, and food production sectors are some of the industries looking for lower costs in labor and raw materials outside of the United States.
I think there are a lot of fundamental changes that are going to affect America over the next 25 years. Right now, we have a high unemployment rate, and yet we have a lot of jobs that are unfilled. And those are in highly skilled sectors, software engineers, things like that. We have to sort of prepare people to sort of make that move to those kinds of jobs and be more mobile in the workforce. And so we're seeing a transition, I think, in the US, like all around the world, that we need to prepare for.
I'm going to come back to the technology here at the New York Stock Exchange,
Sure.
But if I may, as I mentioned to you, we are broadcasting to an international audience. And I was wondering if you are familiar with the inner workings of the stock market in developing countries, for instance, such as Iran.
Yeah. So we work intensively with a lot of stock markets around the world on a number of bases. One is that we actually are a software development company that we sell exchange technology to other exchanges. We run the technology for the Qatar exchange, as an example, in Dubai. In Doha. We do a lot of that work. We also give advice to exchanges all around the world about creating transparent markets that people have faith in. Because a market people need to feel is fair or they're not going to invest. And so we think it is very important for emerging markets to have strong local exchanges. We don't think it would be good for all companies in Iran or anywhere around the world to just list on the New York Stock Exchange. People might think, well, that's good for the New York Stock Exchange. We think in the long run, countries need to have their own strong local exchanges, and then there will be some companies that should be listed globally because they are global brands, they're looking for global investment, and so on. But I think it's a development process. As emerging countries come out, they start being very protective of their market. And the problem is that when you're more protective, it limits the amount of investment that comes in. It makes it harder for companies to grow and invest. What you see typically happening, and you see it in China and in India and other countries around the world, is as they get more growth, as they mature, they gain more confidence, and they start to open up more. They start to loosen the rules on capital raising and on trading. They start to end foreign investment, things like that. And that's part of the natural development cycle of a country.
The New York Stock Exchange is also known for its floor trading, and it looks like the face of the NYSE is changing.
Sure.
Tell me about that.
Well, we believe that it's obvious that technology is more and more important in all of our world, but in trading and investing in particular. Nonetheless, there's still a role for humans. People have judgment that so far, in many cases, machines have not been able to match. And whether it's a complicated trade, whether it's a more volatile market, when people want the pulse of the market, where do they come? They don't go to the electronic market. They come here and they talk to people. And invest.
So there are still people. There is still human contact, and
absolutely.
It's not everything that the computer is going to do.
Absolutely right. And people add the judgment on top of what computers can do. And so we think it's really a matter of finding the right balance between technology and people.
How do you see the future of the New York Stock Exchange, let's say in 10 years?
Well, it's clear that capital flows are becoming more and more global and interconnected. It's also clear that growth in the world economy is going to come out of the more non-traditional places. It's not going to be the US and Europe. It's going to be China and India and Iran and other places all around the world that are growing 2 to 5 times faster than the economies in the developed world, right? The US market GDP grew at about 2.8%. If you look at China, on a bad day, they'll grow at 8%. And so that is the natural result that over the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot more activity in those regions. To compete effectively, NYSE and really NYSE Euronext needs to be a global presence. We need to be involved with global companies, global capital flows, offering products and services to investors and companies all around the world. And that's what we do.
We then headed north to the headquarters of the Forbes company to meet its president and CEO, Steve Forbes. He wrote a book in 2009 with Elizabeth Ames called How Capitalism Will Save US, to educate people about what he calls the world's most moral system.
There are a lot of misunderstandings, so we did it in a form of a conversation, as you would around a kitchen table, what we call the raps against capitalism, such as it's based on greed, the rich gets richer and the poor get poorer, and that kind of thing, and answers in a very colloquial, relaxed way. And in terms of capitalism, I think the idea is coming back again, and the crisis of 2008, 2009, capitalism got a bad rap on that. It did not cause the crisis. Free markets are not inherently unstable. Major economic crises come from mistakes on the part of the government or the central bank or both. And the crisis that we're still in today is a prime example of it. You could never have had, for example, in the United States, the big housing bubble that we had if our central bank, the Federal Reserve, hadn't printed so much money.
People around the world look at the United States and the economic condition in the European Union, and they might compare it to countries such as Brazil and China.
Well, free markets work, and countries like Brazil and China depend upon free markets working. China still hasn't entered its high innovative stage yet, which you only get with an open market, creative society, free society, with political freedoms as well. They're starting to inch along that way, but their model is no model for others because it's really growing on the success of what the United States and other countries have done. So there's a lot of catch-up in the growth of China. Same thing for Brazil. But the capacity of the United States to repeatedly grow faster than other large economies, such as we see in Western Europe, and innovate more than those other countries, whether it's Western European countries, India, China, comes from the fact that we do have open markets, we do have an environment that encourages creativity, and we hope we'll have a government someday again that'll help recreate that kind of environment.
What are the contributions, and are there any shortcomings about capitalism?
The only shortcomings of capitalism are the shortcomings of human nature. You're always going to have people who don't play by the rules, people who, as we say in the U.S., push the envelope, do things they shouldn't do. But that didn't come with capitalism. That came with Adam and Eve or wherever you think we started from. But there's no other system in the world that enables people to advance in terms of, as Abraham Lincoln put it, improve your lot in life than free markets. Absolutely no alternative. Socialism does not work. It depends upon a handful of bureaucrats to try to substitute their judgment for the judgment of literally hundreds of millions of people in the marketplace. And so that is the key. And so free markets, perfect? No, because people are not perfect. But free markets with sensible rules of the road, no better way to enable people to be creative, to innovate, take risks, and improve all of our standards of living.
Forbes says that until the debt crisis, tens of millions of people worldwide were joining the middle class each year. But Occupy protesters say too many people are still excluded from that mobility, especially minorities.
We want justice! We want it now!
An Occupy group recently demonstrated at Federal Reserve branches in 13 U.S. cities to demand more economic equality, including a $100 billion fund from Wall Street banks to create jobs and improve neighborhoods.
What the occupiers should be demonstrating against is the Federal Reserve for harming the value of the U.S. dollar, the U.S. Congress and the White House for spending too much money and doing some other crazy things. The problems that we face with our economy today, the attitude that you only get ahead by taking from others, has been disproven time and again. Marx thought that, but that was 150 years ago. The standard of living is infinitely better today than it was when he thought you'd all get ground down into poverty except for a handful of people. And the essence of free markets, when they're allowed to operate, is you succeed only when you provide a product or service that somebody else wants. So taking, no, that's illegal. That's robbery.
One of the requests that they had was to have more accuracy in the spread of information. And they feel that media is also owned by corporations. Where does
there you get a contradiction. With a tweet, with a handheld, with a desktop, you're in the media business. So even if you own a newspaper or a TV, your relative influence is a fraction of what it used to be. Most people get it now on the handheld or a laptop. They don't do it sitting in front of a TV anymore, or sitting with the radio as they used to do. And so if you own a lot of radio stations or TV stations, so what? You have a whole web world that is wide open. And so that idea of ownership of media is really about 30 years old, out of date, I should say.
The annual Forbes 400 list chronicles the wealthiest people in the United States. Its billionaires list names the richest people around the world. Warren Buffett, with a net worth of $39 billion, stands at number 2 and number 3 respectively in those lists. But Buffett, an Obama supporter, says those with a disproportionate amount of wealth in this country should pay more.
Right now, because of loopholes and shelters in the tax code, a quarter of all millionaires pay lower tax rates than millions of middle-class households. Right now, Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary.
That secretary came to this year's State of the Union address to highlight the president's Buffett rule, which calls for $1.5 trillion in new revenue from tax increases on the wealthy and corporations.
Well, oftentimes people who succeed well, for some reason feel guilty about it. So they want to show that, oh, don't think badly of me because I've done well. No. And I think, again, the way you succeed, as Buffett succeeded, and Gates has succeeded, and Larry Ellison and others, Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, is by providing products and services that people want. Products and services that people often didn't know they needed until they were offered. That's why Steve Jobs said, when he was asked, do you do marketing surveys? He said no, because customers don't know what they want until we show them. And in terms of our lists of rich people, what's amazing is the turnover. Just because you do well today does not mean you're going to do well tomorrow. And there is no aristocracy in that sense. It is a very, very fluid list.
Sir, you've played many different roles in your personal and professional life. One of them was a politician. You ran for president twice. I wanted to get your thoughts on political freedom and economic freedom. Which should come first?
Some people believe, some governments believe, that you can allow economic freedom and restrict political freedom. It's not the way the real world works, because when people get accustomed to making decisions on how they vote with their money and demand more property rights, it's a very short step to demand, I want to have some say in who's ruling my life in the town hall. And you've seen it in South Korea, once a very authoritarian regime, now a vibrant democracy. Taiwan, Chile, had a dictator in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, Pinochet, who allowed economic reforms and freedom. Prosperity resulted, and he thought that means he would win a plebiscite. They had the plebiscite, and out he went. Chile has got a very vibrant democracy today. You're seeing the same stirrings a little bit in China, and you're going to see it in the rest of the world. That's one advantage that India has. It's had a long-functioning democracy, very messy, often inefficient, as these things are, but it's got legitimacy that is, I think, going to enable the country to move consistently over the years ahead, instead of lurching and always worrying, are we going to have 10,000 riots in the streets?
After our interview, I asked Mr. Forbes about the next generation of business leaders. He told me about a project his company has been working on called 30 Under 30.
Well, we've often felt, and you can tap into it in this new media age more than ever before, huge reservoirs of entrepreneurial energy and people doing things at a fairly young age. A couple of months ago, for example, we did a cover story on kids in college running businesses between $100,000 and $500,000 of revenue, and not just selling trinkets to their classmates, but doing real businesses and still staying in school.
So we decided to catch up with one of those young entrepreneurs. Talal Hadavi has more from San Francisco.
Maziar Kazaruni started his first internet company while he was still in high school. Once the money started to pour in, he convinced his parents he should drop out and give his internet business a real chance.
I made this website when I was 15, and when I'm going through high school and seeing that I'm bringing in more money than any of my teachers possibly could, it kind of messes with your head.
2 years later, after moving on from his first venture, Kazaruni and his good friend Matt Schlicht, also a high school dropout, went to work for the live video startup Ustream. Live video was something new at the time, and Kazaruni's job was to convince rap performers that it was the next big thing. He was good at it, and the rappers' praises were proof.
I appreciate you, Mozzie, man. You like the Ustream Jesus, man.
So good that rapper Lil Wayne asked Kazaruni to become his personal digital strategist.
We helped them reclaim his Facebook page, which had 1 million fans, and they didn't have access to it. They weren't posting anything to these 1 million fans they had there. It's gone from 1 million to 31 million fans now. We got him a Guinness World Record for the most liked status update on Facebook. Young Money, Lil Wayne, Lil Twist, all these guys, like they're kind of family to us now. We've been working with them for years.
A few months ago, Kazaruni and Schlicht left Ustream to start their own company, TracksBuy, which allows artists to showcase their music, videos, and tour dates on Facebook. Venture capitalist Shavin Pishavar thought their idea was so good that he invested $500,000.
We are trying to turn all our knowledge that we've gotten from running Lil Wayne's digital and Lil Twist's digital into products and features that every artist can take advantage of.
TracksBuy has already grown to the point that the pair has hired several computer and social media savvy friends. But they are keeping it simple for now. They operate the business out of their home.
If you really think about it, it's not that big of a risk, especially if you're young. It's so easy to just jump into this and try, because the worst that's going to happen is, you'll go broke and you'll go try to get another job. I think it's completely worth it, because if you can make it happen, it's going to be so much more rewarding than any job.
We've been everywhere and back, but
some 50 artists with a combined total of 150 million fans have already signed up. Kazaruni may just be living that American dream that James Truslow Adams or
I'm living life right now, man.
TracksBuy artist Drake is talking about.
Till it's over, but it's far from over.
All right. VOA News, San Francisco.
Long as someone drank it.
And there you have it, the future of capitalism. You can reach us via email, Twitter, and Facebook. Our email is prs@voanews.com. For Perspectives, I'm Setareh On Capitalism. Thank you for being with us. Good night.
This is the Voice of America.
It was extended.